Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are all well. It seems our politicians keep refusing to let us go on holiday. They keep coming up with nonsense that making us coming back out here from our wee holidays and to speak. And so we should. I mean, we know we have a new Prime Minister, and we've had the usual propaganda. Oh, he's different. You know, he's sacked all Keir Starmer's heavy duty ones, Eva. He's got rid of those pro-Israeli Zionists. Well, they're gone. He's different, and he's capping the bus fares, and he walks in water and he turns water into wine, and he's an absolute raving socialist. You know, all this nonsense we're getting, Eva. But the fact of the matter is, everything he's done tells me, I don't know what you think, but it's the exact same. For example, this week, Eva, he was promoting that thing that the English love, their weapons of mass destruction that they put on the Clyde. And I can't, as the actress said to Bishop, I can't get this up. Techie, can you get that picture up for me? The weapons of mass destruction. There we go. So he's pledged all this money and pretending it's to create jobs when all the nonsense is to project British power, is it not?
Absolutely. You know, meet the new boss, same as the old. And the headlines are quite interesting. If you Google, for example, the Burnham bounce, and this is a reference, obviously, to his increased standing in the polls relative to
we're coming to that.
And one of the big issues was, of course, Trident renewal. And what he said was he was in Barrow-in-Furness announcing money and jobs and investment. And what he said was he was placing the renewal of Trident at the heart of his vision of a reindustrialised Britain as he launched the next phase of the nuclear submarine replacement programme. Defence spending on projects such as the £31 billion Dreadnought class boats would be built in Barrow-in-Furness, and then you know where they're going to be stored. Yep, on the Clyde. What he said was keeping the country safe is the first responsibility of any government, but security is not only about what we build, it is about who builds it and who benefits from it. And the new phase of contracts worth £8.5 billion would help support 18,000 extra jobs in nuclear defence by 2030 and 22,000 additional apprentices by 2035. Though the problem for Scots, of course, is we would not support that level of spending on nuclear, and the jobs aren't going to be in Scotland. But the downside is that the submarines will be in Scotland, although not controlled by the Scots. We have different priorities. Bairns, not bombs, as we say, week in and week out. And it's sad to see that the emphasis on defence is one that has such a high place in Andy Burnham's agenda. So it's just more of the same. We're controlled remotely from Westminster, and we're supposed to suck it up. And our priorities, such as alleviating poverty, NHS, education, public services, you name it, they all fall by the wayside because he's promoting the warmongering interests of the United Kingdom as per usual.
Yeah, that's the same old, different day, Phil, but the same old nonsense, you know, Britain back. Even Tony Blair in his heyday said it's just a vanity product. They're of no use whatsoever to us. It's a hell of a lot of money for something that's just for vanity.
And indeed it is, and that's the worst part of it. That's the thing that we should be absolutely enraged about. It's the same old stuff. Trident missiles are manufactured by Lockheed Martin in the United States, where the nuclear warheads, they are designed and produced by the UK, by the Atomic Weapons Establishment. But the launch codes and the guidance systems all American. It's not an independent nuclear deterrent. France has one. The Russians do. Even the South Koreans do. Sorry, the North Koreans do. We don't. And the Trident 2 D5 used by the Vanguard class submarines are developed, as I said, by Lockheed Martin. All we do is procure these missiles through shared stock arrangement under agreements originating from the Polaris sales agreement, and they're maintained at the Kings Bay submarine base in Georgia before being deployed to UK submarines based, as Eva stated, at Faslane with the warheads at Coolport. And the other thing about it is it doesn't work. Even the BBC reported in 2024 that it doesn't work. They test-fired Trident missiles, okay, from a Royal Navy submarine, and it failed the second time in a row. The latest test of the nuclear deterrent was from Vanguard and was the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, who had to apologise to Parliament for the mess he made. And the fact it didn't, he was there, he was actually on board, and it just had a 7-year refit. So, I mean, he said, an anomaly did occur, but it's still the most reliable system in the world. My backside. The other thing is Scotland gets wiped out in a nuclear war, as we're just a bunch of people have just walked into what was a very quiet cafe. So Scotland gets wiped out in a nuclear war as we are launching a launching pad for the USA, who along with Israel are the world's most warmongering nation. Let's examine why. Glasgow's around 30 or so miles from the Faslane nuclear submarine base. We're wiped out when it's attacked. That's why they don't want near it London. I'll leave it there and see if it quietens down a wee bit.
Yeah, hopefully it will. Stick it on mute anyway. Won't find you a quid every time this time. Simon, but as we said, we've changed our Prime Minister. We've been promised he's completely different from the guy before him. And I've got a few things, but I'm sticking at the moment with the weapons of mass destruction. It's one of the first things he reaffirmed Britain's commitment to nuclear weapons. It's disgusting.
That's the word for it. Just to go back a wee second, we were talking about holidays, politicians' holidays. We need to interrupt ours, Roddy, but they certainly don't interrupt their summer recess, do they? Seems to go on forever. The thing about the nuclear weapons, this has been going on throughout our lifetime. Is this treading all over Scotland? Not in my backyard kind of thing, isn't it? It was dumping nuclear waste here at one stage as well. I mean, you name it, it goes on. But my concern, and I suppose it's the concern that goes through the show today for me, looking at the topic, some of the topics that we're going to discuss, is that it's not simply Trident. It's whether Scotland has ever had any meaningful influence over decisions that affect Scotland. And defence is reserved, so we don't have any say in that whatsoever. But all the consequences are local. They're all local to Scotland, and we suffer all those consequences. And we always get told, it's job creation and whatever. Absolute nonsense. It's a constitutional issue, as is much of what we're going to talk about today. And it's that irks me. Absolutely. And I don't even like getting involved in the debates, Roddy. You know that. I do it here for you because you're special. But because these debates are not Scottish debates, they're not things we would even be discussing, because nuclear weapons wouldn't be an issue if we were a sovereign state. Just like our foreign policy that we're going to come on to, Scotland would be a totally different type of country if we weren't lumbered with the British foreign policy.
Absolutely. Calling me the last person that called me special was my mother. She was putting me on the grey bus in the morning. That was it.
Yeah. A special bus. Yeah.
Exactly. To get back to Eva, as I say, we were promised everything different. And what was the next thing he did this week? I'll try again and see if I can. I'm going to have to take it. There it goes. His first thing he did was he embraced about shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, a fascist state. Now, ever stick to what side you're on, it is a fascist state. We know that with the Banderas and the Azovs. He's gone and done that. Now, we're told we've got no money to do all the things that we need done in the UK, fix potholes, fix the hospitals, fix the schools. But to fund Ukraine, to fund Israel, to get Trident, there's always money for bombs and killing, isn't there, Eva?
Totally. What I think he said was the unbreakable bond between the United Kingdom and Ukraine will continue. And I think some of the press were saying that the very fact that Zelensky was the first foreign leader that he received at number 10 was described as his Ukraine gambit and a symbolic start. And what he said was, we are with Ukraine 100%. I am personally with you 100%, and I will honour every commitment that this country has made. We stand shoulder to shoulder, and our support is unwavering. How much has that cost so far, and how much will it cost in future? I think the figures are probably inestimable, unimaginable, and absolutely enormous. And so financially, it's a huge cost to the UK, but morally and internationally, it's highly, highly dubious. And again, to echo what Simon put so well, Scotland would have a different attitude to this. I cannot imagine that we'd be contributing the financial support that the United Kingdom has pledged thus far or has pledged for future purposes. And I don't think that morally an independent Scottish government would be supporting the Ukraine in this ongoing bloody awful conflict.
No, it's the old double standard. I'll be coming to you, Simon. Don't worry, old chap. I'll be coming to you. It's the double standards. Phil, as I say, the different messages. First thing, bring in Zelensky, support the regime and continue the warmongering. This is no different from the last guy. What's different?
No, it's exactly the same. And again, no change. In April 22, remember, Ukraine and Russia had agreed a peace plan, but the British again intervened at the best of Biden. Boris Bloody Johnson, that complete twat, was sent to tell Zelensky to fight on as the West would support them to the last Ukrainian soldier. We stand side by side, Burnham. I don't see you in the front line, mate. I don't see any Brits in there, and thank God, because the British people don't want it. The Scottish people certainly don't want it. And this is kind of what happened, except Trump saw it for the failure it is and dropped the whole Ukrainian affair against Russia, the proxy war that we created, solely into the Europeans' lap. It's almost over now, and it was an unmitigated disaster for the West, but especially for the people of the Ukraine. Now, they fought bravely, fair enough, but against their Slavic Christian Orthodox brothers in Russia, who they have more in common with than the rest of the West. In fact, there was a quote from the lead negotiator at the time. He said Russia was ready to end the war if we took neutrality, talking about Ukraine. This is Ukraine's former top negotiator. He confirmed it. But Boris Johnson said, let's just fight. Let's? Who's we? It's not we, it's not the elites, it's not their kids. Those I have no pity for are the Stepan Banderas fascists who have direct links going right back to the Nazism and the Holocaust, which we must not ever forget. And the lesson from that, of course, is never again. But never again means for everyone. And here we have the US and Israel supporting Zelensky while carrying out a genocide in Palestine. This is evil and got to be stopped. And remember who's the aggressor here. Don't believe the mainstream media. The Maidan Revolution 2014. Since then, 14,000 Russians. Before the special military operation in 22, Russian speakers, 14,000 of them killed in Ukraine, murdered by Zelensky's regime. Zelensky's an actor, cokehead and thief, voted in on a platform of peace and then immediately went to war. He's sponsored by the West. The first several hundred million that he stole is recorded in the Pandora Papers, which is the sister paper of the Panama Papers. Stepan Banderas, look it up, folks. Look at the history. The Tornado and all the other battalions, the Nazi battalions of the Ukraine, with an unbroken link right back to the 100,000 or so that volunteered to man the Nazi death camps. It was the most corrupt country in Europe, still is, and a third at most of what was sent actually got to the front lines. So no, we are wasting our time supporting. We're on the wrong side, and that is not what Scotland does.
No, actually, this last week in Ukraine, they were marching in memory of the SS Galicia division of Ukraine, which was an SS Nazi tank division that killed hundreds of thousands in Eastern Europe. They were marching. The Western press, of course, don't talk about that. They don't mention it, that we're supporting a fascist regime. But that's the thing, Simon. He's in for Ukraine. He's in for the weapons of mass destruction. He says, the Labour Party were wrong about our policy on Israel, but the Americans can keep bombing Iran, which is part of the same deal, from British bases. Nothing changes.
The thing about, and you sound surprised by that, Roddy. The thing is, they're
cynical,
all in it.
I am being cynical.
They're all in it for the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's all about power, isn't it? It's all about the next election. That's what we know. All of our politics is short term because it's only aimed at over the next 2 or 3 years till the next election. And that's the same here in Scotland, unfortunately. I'd like to look at it. I'm listening to Phil there, and I started off trying to take notes and I gave up because the barrage of information is fascinating, stuff that I don't know about. But I want to take a slightly different look at it and remind us that it's war. And I think the very act of war has become commonplace, mainly because of Western powers. And Britain has always been like that throughout the last 200 or 300 years of the empire. More than that, that's strength, that military power is what drives just about everything that we do, economically as well as politically. And I think that's where Scotland would be different. One of the reasons that I'm a supporter of independence is that we can create something different.
Yeah.
Something that's not built on jumping into trenches. Maybe Phil's got a point. Maybe we could just put our leaders in a boxing ring or a wrestling ring or wherever we want to put them and let them have a war. And then the casualties would be minimal. In fact, it would be a bonus, whoever came out on top. So I think that we're kind of dragged into this, guys, to think it's normal, that's how we resolve things. We talked about Israel there and Palestine. These problems were caused 100 years ago with our input. The same in Pakistan and India, who are at war just now. The same all over the world. We have to intervene to look after British interests. That's what it's really all about, isn't it? Even the Falklands War comes under that as well. So I like to look above that and think that the country we want to create together, regardless of our individual policies and foreign policy, some of the underlying principles are what would unite us. And one of them is that Scotland could take a totally different position in the world order and be a force for peace and a force for negotiation and a force for tolerance, if you like. That's the Scotland I'd like to see.
You're quite right. I mean, when you say British interest, the fact is you say Scotland would take a different line. I believe they would. When you say British interest, excuse me, I think you mean English interests.
Well, we're coming on to that when we talk about the North Sea.
Yeah. Correct. But what we're saying here is the fact is that I don't think the English establishment's ever forgiven the Russians for the Romanovs. And for those who don't know who the Romanovs were, that was the Tsar and his family who were all executed in 1917 by the Bolsheviks. I don't think they've ever got over that. That's one of the problems. But that's the thing, Eva. All these things he's doing, the same people who tell us there's no genocide, it's self-defense in Palestine, that Iran's bad and we have to change the regime, they're bad guys and we didn't start the war, they did. The same people are telling us, the Ukraine are good guys, they're not bad guys, they're not no fascist. The same people that lie to us are the same people who tell us every day Scotland's too poor, too weak and too stupid. There's a connection.
Good way of putting it, Roddy. I mean, we mentioned earlier there about the permission given by Burnham to the Americans to use British bases to bomb Iran. So, of course, what happened was that Iran spoke out about it, and in essence, we're saying, well, that makes the UK an enemy of Iran, and there was then an outcry to an extent about how Prestwick shouldn't be used for that purpose because it makes Scotland a target. But as we've already said, Scotland is a target. And it really grinds your gears, to put it mildly, when we're lectured to and laughed at by the unionist politicians who support the warmongering position on the one hand, tell us, as you said, who all our enemies are, deny the fact of that genocide in Palestine on the one hand, and on the other have multiple notions and ideas about how they're going to devolve power from Westminster to, for example, as we spoke about last week, the newly created or to be created mayors in the cities of Scotland, a thing that we don't want and we don't need. But the purpose is that the power has not to go to Holyrood. It's to go to locals. And what it's about isn't about what the people of Scotland want. It's about the union keeping a tight grip on the people of Scotland so that obviously they continue to benefit from our bountiful resources. It's only lies, propaganda, obfuscation, and it's so sad to see that so many people fall for it. But on the plus side, I think we're still confident that there's a majority in Scotland who favour independence. And what our efforts should be striving towards is creating the unity that that movement needs, and the electoral event where people have the opportunity to vote loudly and strongly in favour of independence, and then start setting to rights all aspects of policy in Scotland, but with particular reference to prosperity and peace.
Yeah, that's what we actually need, Phil, but I'm afraid our southern neighbour has always been a clamorous nation. Ever since 1066. Them, the Romans and the Vikings, that's the only people we've been fighting. Not the North Koreans, not the Russians. They've never threatened us, never bombed us. But we have to hate them because the Anglos hate them.
Yep. Yeah, it's ever been thus, and the whole thought that we are dictated to in a country with, again, we're 8.4% of the population. It's quite clear that even the people of Britain don't want wars, but we've had anointed, crowned. Just look think about this. From Thatcher, Blair, Brown, Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, very few of these were actually elected. Anointed would be the right answer. And you can get right down to Sunak, Starmer, and Burnham, the latest one who's crowned the supreme leader. And really, all these people are puppets. They don't actually control. Because these people that lead us, Burnham's just another wolf in sheep's clothing, and controlled, as the US control him in Israel, because he was in AIPAC, well, our equivalent, Friends of Israel. He was in it, and his chief of staff, as we know, was the chairman of Friends of Israel. So he's a war hawk, pretending to be a man of the people that knows the price of a bag of crisps. He's a multi-millionaire that was not elected to be Prime Minister, but rather ascended to that lofty but nonetheless servile position via the latest coronation in a long line of selected leaders I've just read out, most of whom, it's like that classic Noam Chomsky quote when he said, was it Andrew Neil? He said, you would be sitting there, you didn't think. Who was it?
What do you call him?
Another famous reporter.
Aye, he'll come to me.
But anyway, he said you would not be sitting there if you didn't think the way you did, because the BBC wouldn't have put you into that place unless you were servile and did what you were told and thought the way you thought. And he's absolutely right. These are the same. So basically, these people who are really in control are desperate to hang on to the Western hegemony. They're so desperate to cling on to it. I mean, the hedge funds, the banks, big pharma, insurance, military-industrial complex. All of the those who would keep us on their knees. As the quote goes, an evil man will burn his own nation to the ground to rule over the ashes. And make no mistake, these are evil men who don't give a damn about you. And the politicians like Burnham, Starmer, going way back, are just the highest level of servants to the corruption that runs the planet and steals from the people. The latest term coined from these parasites is the Epstein class, and that's sadly exactly where we are.
Yeah, that was Andrew Marr. It came to me. That's who it was, Andrew Marr. Moving on a bit, if I may, Simon, and you sort of mentioned it, just some background for any of our viewers that don't know. When oil was first discovered off the coast of Scotland, we were given the British National Oil Corporation. We were told this would be, and the headquarters were in Bothwell Street. You remember, you come off the Kinky Bridge and there it was, the big, we're all proud to look at it. And Scotland was sharing the bounty off its coast. Thatcher was in shortly after. British National Oil Corporation, they left the brass plate in Bothwell Street like they did with the distillers' whiskey, and they moved it down to London and sold it to BP. Scotland didn't get a penny out of it, not a centime, not a groat, nothing. And it went to BP, who have made billions and zillions out of it. And now what they're going to do is they've decided, Simon, that they're going to sell off their North Sea business. And again, Scotland, our natural resources, our wealth, it's going to go for billions, and we are not going to see one brass farthing. But we're not a colony, Simon. No.
You're absolutely right, Roddy. Of course you are. And it's been, since I was a teenager, we've been having this debate, and it's The debate isn't really about who owned the oil, is it? It's about what was done with the wealth. That's what's the really frustrating part, because the money that's been taken out of the North Sea over the last 50 or 60 years is astronomical. And I know that we talk about it regularly, but it does no harm to go over things and maybe see them from a slightly different angle at different times. But Norway turned its oil revenues into a sovereign wealth fund, I think they called it. And it's now worth trillions. That's millions with a T. And Scotland had every right to ask, why has the North Sea not left a comparable long-term legacy here on our shores, where we're home to the North Sea? So I'm not saying that Scotland and Norway are identical, obviously they aren't, but it's a perfectly legitimate question why one country used its oil revenues to build wealth and the other country uses it to fund Trident and other unwanted and undemocratic institutions that have grown up round that wealth. And as Phil very properly put forward, the 1% keep making money from these things, while the rest of us toil away day and day to keep ourselves our head above water. And I think future generations in Scotland will struggle to look back and say, why haven't we got a lasting legacy from the wealth that was in the North Sea, even if that had been done under the Union Jack and they had given us some consideration of the fact that it's on our shores. But we're just trod over all again. It's a common theme throughout our podcast, isn't it? For me, it's one of the strongest arguments in the independence debate. It's not simply about oil. It's about who gets to make decisions about Scotland's natural resources and how the benefits are used, and how transparent are those decisions, because the answer to that is a different setup altogether.
Yeah, I believe in some of the Canadian provinces that have oil wealth and natural resources. They get extra money because of that as a sort of a wee thank you. We get hee-haw. But that's the thing, Eva. I mentioned the Distillers Company, which was the biggest, way ahead of Diego in the time. We've still got the brass plate in Waterloo Street, would you believe, in Glasgow. We've still got the BNOC plate in Bothwell Street for the Oil Corporation. Two of the biggest money earners the UK's got. And we've had hee-haw out of it. It's frightening.
It's absolutely terrifying, particularly if you do look, for example, as Simon said, at Norway and see what they've done, and you imagine what Scotland could have been like. And I've said this many times in my life. I remember when oil was discovered. I lived with my mum and dad in a caravan in Crieff, and I remember celebrations in Hogmanay because all the folk that lived beside us thought there was going to be a bonanza. And the way I kind of put it as I was growing up was, I used to watch Dallas on the telly. Remember that? Dallas and South.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I wondered when I was a wee girl or a teenager, why was it that the people of Scotland weren't, wearing diamonds and Stetsons and celebrating with their flash fancy cars? And as I've got older, I've looked at issues like, for example, homelessness. And I wonder how many people know exactly how many people in Scotland are actually homeless at any given time. Well, last year it was 34,000 households were homeless. There are thousands of people currently in temporary accommodation. You can look at school exam results. You can look at teacher numbers. You can look at teacher job security. You can look at the need for nurses and doctors, and you can see that there are gaps in provision in some areas where there's perhaps a lack of psychologists, psychiatrists, radiographers, orthopaedic surgeons, hospital waiting lists, ambulance waiting times, all this sort of stuff. And you know perfectly well that if Scotland had been an independent country in 1967 when Amoco discovered oil in the North Sea, then that money could have been put to better use, either for public services, peacekeeping and diplomacy in the world, or for the provision of the resource of to satisfy the general reasonable needs of the general population. A national house building company, a national energy company, and provide the holistic support that people are entitled to demand from a civilised country that calls itself a democracy. And that's what we don't have in the United Kingdom. But we've got the opportunity to create that Scotland, the Scotland of our dreams. Doesn't have to remain a dream, provided that there's unity within our movement, as I said earlier, and we make concerted efforts to create that vote for independence and take back control of our own resources and create a future destiny for the people of Scotland that is worthwhile having and looking forward to and contributing towards building.
Absolutely. Just to you, Phil, almost the same question, but all we're left with is brass plates and not a brass farthing anywhere. The Scottish people really need to wise up.
Aye, absolutely, and this is compounded by the BP's sell-off of North Sea assets. I mean, the quote was, "It's our assets." Well, it actually belongs to the people of Scotland. As we know, 8.3% of the population that have 97.5%, approaching 98% of all the oil in the UKCS is in Scottish waters, which are 66, about 2/3 of the sea area that the UK owns because of the Rockall Basin, our distance from Norway and other countries. We get the full benefit of the UNCLOS United Nations Constitution and the law of the sea, of the ownership of the mineral rights for over 200 nautical miles, whereas England's too close to Ireland, too close to France, too close to the Low Countries to get much of that sea area.
Too close to us for my liking as well.
Well, I know, and connected to us. Unless we build that big trench and fill it with water, then technically we can be our own island and control the bridges. But they're selling off what is the assets of the people of Scotland because we are sovereign. That's the bottom line. So they put the BP put their UK North Sea oil and gas assets up for sale as the CEO, the new one, pushes an overhaul. And this is just news just in. It wants to sell the British oil and gas fields in the North Sea, which could fix more than 2 billion, according to estimates. Okay, now. They want to do is they want to accelerate their portfolio changes overhaul aimed at improving profitability for whom? The shareholders. It's who's ever thus. A day earlier, Andy Burnham said he planned to take a pragmatic approach to developing and using oil and gas resources in the North Sea, setting out his position after Trump said the basin would be opened up. Trump said Scotland's oil is going to be opened up. We want it. We're using it. We'll invade you if you don't open up. Sling your hoot. Now he's going to be doing what he's told because he's more of the same. But here's the important thing. There's a few companies, a lot that I was worked for BP in the past, so I know a lot about this. So the North Sea, the legacy, the BP was British Petroleum. It's just called BP now. Previously Anglo Persian Oil Company. When we dethroned the Mossadegh in 1953, I think, with the CIA, and put the Shah of Iran in place so we could keep the oil, whereas he wanted to take it for the people. So Britain has a long history of keeping it away for the people. But anyway, it's worked in the North Sea for more than 6 decades. I worked for 5.5 years for BP in the North Sea. So currently, last year, that's about 117,000 barrels out of 2.3 million barrels of oil equivalent per day. So the UK produces right now, it's quite low, it's about 770,000 barrels per day. And at $90 a barrel, that's the Brent crude price, there's about 70 million a day. Okay? 70 million a day. It's over 25 billion per year, and that's a low production, and that's just the futures price of Brent crude, because don't believe what they tell you. It's much higher than you think. They're lying to you, and they're going to sell their stake in the Kilzeen field as well. So BP will will keep the aviation fuel, distribution business, retail sites, its trading desk, alongside its London headquarters, but that's it. But what does it really mean for us? Because BP is privately owned. It's not ours, but the oil is. Bear in mind, folks, all we do, the British government does on our behalf, is license the harvesting of our oil to allow other people to take it. So it doesn't belong, the profit doesn't belong to the people, even though it's our oil. If I were oil minister, it would be based in the Norwegian model, and it would belong to the people of Scotland, and which is why people that think like me and think like the way we do are barred from ever being in such positions by the current UK establishment, which includes the Scottish Government, SNP, and the answer to that, my friends, is independence, nothing less.
Here, here. I mean, Statoil and the British National Oil Corporation were set up at the same time, supposedly to do the same things. The Norwegians kept Statoil, and now are the richest country in the world with the best of everything going, and the best infrastructure, the best pensions, the best welfare. And we've got hee-haw. Not a coin, nothing. And something that Simon said earlier about the UK, if you actually look at Oman, Iran, Saudi, Kuwait, Palestine, Israel, Sudan, what have they all got in common? Oh, they were all British. That's where all the world's problems are. Pakistan, India, British. Bangladesh, British. All the problem areas, folks, that was the British that caused it with their thieving and their colonialism. And that's where they are. But the question I was asking, Simon, was, we've got a new Prime Minister. Is he any different from the others? Well, I don't know, but the polls are saying this. And the question I would ask is that Labour, for the first time in quite some time, have allegedly gone in front of reform. 28% to Labour, 24% to reform. Is this the Burnham bounce, or is the reform bubble burst, or is it a bit of both?
Of course it is. I'm laughing because you thought I could see that on my screen.
Oh, you made your screen bigger.
It's a magnifying glass I would have needed instead of my specs, Roddy. But of course it's the bounce. That's what our politics are all about. And it's that friction. It's why we have an adversarial set up in the British Parliament. It's the whole way the thing's designed is to make us feel as though there's real tension there, when, as Phil has quite properly pointed out, it's all decided in rooms far away from scrutiny and from public discourse, that's for sure. But so to answer your question, yes, I don't pay any attention to those things because they're all construed that way. And as elections come, there's always the next election. Is it any of you ever tried to get anything done in local government or at government level? All you get is, oh, there's an election round the corner. That could be 2 years. But that's enough to kick it down the road because they're already focused on the election. And of course, after the election, they're busy doing all the things to feather their own nests. To come back to something that Eva said, first thing, Roddy, don't ever put me on after Phil again, okay? I don't want to be after, because he gets my brain going and I go down all sorts of avenues. And after Eva speaks, I'm ready to just follow on with her train of thought. And that train of thought was when she said that the Scottish people need to wake up. I was thinking about that, and as she said it, maybe put it slightly differently, was that I think it's time that Scotland as a nation became aware of the long-term consequences for our children and their children of these decisions that are made about our national assets, about our daily lives, about our jobs, about our pensions, about our futures, and the futures of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren being made elsewhere. The lesson I think we need is to ask more questions about how Scotland's resources are managed and who's ultimately benefiting. We need to become more informed, more demanding when it comes to that. And we need to stop accepting things at face value and just tagging along, because that's what's been expected of us for a long, long time. Finally, on what Eva said, we're talking here about our resources as in the North Sea. I was going to say I happen to believe, but that's not true. I know that Scotland's resources are much more than a couple of billion barrels of oil. The resources here in Scotland are totally untapped. And they're much more valuable than the North Sea will ever be. And that's our people, because we're suppressed currently. And we can't express our values in the world. We can't exert, not authority, because that sounds like what the British do. We can't exert our influence through friendship and through lots of other Scots traits that we just demonstrated in Boston. I'm not long back from America. And the Scottish brand is something completely different from what we're lumbered with as part of the United Kingdom. And that resource that's quite hard to put a name to, and it's quite hard to, but we all know what I'm talking about. And every Scottish person that listens to this will know what I'm talking about. And that's the resource we have that's currently not allowed to have any influence or to come to the surface, because we're lumbered with this institution that's all about making money and making the few wealthy.
Absolutely. In fact, talking on that of the Tartan Army, I sent a message to John Swinney saying, what are you going to do to capitalise on this? This is an opportunity for Scottish businesses. As you say, the Scottish brand, in particular in Massachusetts, New England, is an all-time high. I would have a trade in there now, an office. It would upset the unionists as well as soon as you do that. What are they doing? Nothing. I would also be getting people over there politically to start on their senators, Eva, on their congressmen and women, on their, that when the time comes, we'll be looking for a bit of help here. No Scotland, no party type stuff. They're not doing anything. But that's what we need to be doing.
Roddy, as you know, I travel quite a lot in my retirement. That's the whole objective. And everywhere I go in the world, talking Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, that same brand could be doing exactly what you're talking about. And it would do if Scotland was allowed to sit down and say, what do we want to be in this world? We would make friends all over the world because of who we are, and we'd be able to work with people instead of trying to suppress them and take their resources from them like they do to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that, excuse me, Eva, do you think it's a bounce? For a while I believed that Reform were going to slip. He's done his job for the British establishment. He's pulled both the two Buggins turns, whoever it is, turn Labour and Tory. He's pulled them to the right. He's no longer needed. I think, the establishment are now out to ruin him. Or is there a genuine Labour bounce?
There can't possibly be a genuine Labour bounce because he's not actually done anything that's any different from anybody else. His style's slightly different insofar as he's less of a dictator perhaps than Starmer was. And I say that with particular reference to his comments recently about whether or not the assisted dying bill would be brought back to the House of Commons, because he seems to have said, no, we'll take a pause on that. So slightly different style, but the end result's the same. So the bounce is not a permanent one. I kind of think, though, that there's a reasonable chance that if what he is calling a bounce continues, he'll start talking in terms of a general election earlier than anticipated to try to benefit from that. I don't see Burnham voluntarily going for the full term. And I think that probably explains in part his cozying up to Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats to set himself up for a potential coalition if he doesn't get the size that Keir Starmer had. And if there were such an election, that would be a bonus for the Scottish independence movement, subject to certain provisos, which are that there should be a united movement and an agreement that in every single constituency there is only one candidate for independence, and that all those candidates stand under a strapline of independence, nothing less, and we achieve the independence supporting majority MP representation at Westminster, because that gives us a democratic mandate to declare independence. So the entire independence movement of Scotland should presently be planning for that opportunity, and let's not miss it again. So here's hoping that that's the direction in which we're heading, because I can't thole thinking what the future for Scotland is like otherwise. And Simon is right to say that people should be thinking about what kind of country are we bequeathing to our children, our grandchildren and their children. You shudder to think. You remember in the Alex Salmond terms, we thought Scotland was beginning to prosper and we were starting to do really great things that we've always done as a nation, but not been recognised for because we were considered to be British, but doing good things as the people of Scotland. So I think that there was a spring in our step in Alex's time. There certainly was in mine, looking forward to the referendum, and absolute total dejection immediately after it. But now, if you look around yourself in Scotland, you see things you don't want to be seeing. You see, bad roads and weeds and destruction and buildings that are derelict, and pubs and clubs and hotels are closing, and there's problems in the whole hospitality sector. There's issues within all our public services. That cannot get better when we remain part of the Union, where we've got a Scottish Parliament with a limited, restricted budget. We need to do better. because if we don't, we're going to some very dark and horrible places in terms of health. And I mean, I know addiction is something that Simon speaks about a lot, but there are links between poverty and poor health and addiction and, you know, poor outcomes. And our people will not realise the potential of our nation, as Simon spoke about, unless and until the economic levers and the decisions are made in Scotland, controlled by Scotland, in and for the people of Scotland, and not remotely as if we were puppets on a string.
Absolutely. And if we do get a general election sooner or later, we should actually be pushing this. Not often I would back Thatcher. See? Does not need a referendum on independence. She needs to send a majority of nationalist MPs to Westminster to have a mandate for independence. Just what he was talking about there, Phil. You know, get one candidate, independence, nothing else. Boom. And let's go to Westminster and say, right, we have a mandate.
Yes, well, that's what we thought we were doing in 2015 when 56 out of the 59 were down, and I was one of them. And to my absolute shock and horror, I didn't realise at the time, but the signs were very, very concerning from day one. Day one. I mean, I manage big teams, okay? So I manage teams. Shut up, man. Fuck, some anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, volume. I can't stop all that. And so good luck to everybody having fun in here. Jesus. But anyways, hopefully it's quieting down. But when I went down there, I'm used to managing big teams, and okay, and I worked in the oil industry for 15 years, and we pay a lot of money to people to do jobs, and it's hard to get people to do what you tell them to do when you're paying the big money. Bear in mind, in politics, it's all volunteers, so herding cats is nigh on impossible. It's nigh on impossible. So this is why politics is so difficult. And the other thing is, but the problem is, a lot of these people are elected. They've got no experience in the real world. A lot of them are like professional politicians, if there's such a thing. That just means a professional toady ass slicker who does what they're told. That should be the new definition in the dictionary. But when I look at these people who went down there, and I looked at what we were saying and what we were doing, and I looked at a management team of 6 or 8, I think it was, who were there prior to the 56 going down, and I watched as they fumbled about organisation, about structure. Allocation on job roles was based on favouritism and people who would toe the current line as dictated by Nicola Sturgeon. And I'm going, why are we putting that person there when we've got an engineer who knows about this? Why am I not doing something about oil when I've been 15 years? I've been a contracts manager all my days, and I've been 15 years on some of the biggest projects in the world in oil and writing strategy on it. Why am I not getting used for that? What's going on here? I thought we were here to get. And I know I sat beside Mulneer Tommy when he did his "We're going to be good parliamentarians." I'm going, what did you say, Tommy? What did I thought we were here to be put some sand in the bugger's Vaseline? That's what I was going down to do. Smash the place up, rip it up, man. Rip it up and start again, as Orange Juice famously sang. And that's what we should be doing. We should be taking this down, and we should be getting not physically, but getting the claymores out the Thatcher and going for this. Don't hold back. Don't stand back. Don't take crap from these people. They don't give a damn about us. They never have. I remember that. And I'll go back to, I keep going on about this one. I was asked when I was down in Parliament, can you summarise what politics is all about in 5 minutes or less? And I said, no. But I know a man that can. And you know, here it comes. It's George Carlin, The American Dream. Because they have thrown us overboard 40 years ago. They don't give a damn about us. Your education is getting worse. Your healthcare is getting worse. Everything that Simon and particularly Eva's been fighting about for generations, for people like Eva have been fighting about is what do we leave for our children? What future do we bequeath our children in one of the richest countries on earth? And there is no excuse for approaching 1 in 4 in poverty. Excuse me, and the depression. The fact that like 20% of our children see no positive future for them in Scotland. That's disgusting, and that's down to us. What are you doing about it? See if you're watching this. Why go out and tell people about this? Do something about it. I mean, we're sitting here talking. We're actually also trying to do something be fun, get involved in party politics, and it's extremely frustrating because everybody's got a genius idea, and everybody thinks they're the bee's knees. And the reality is, it's unification. unification behind a single, simple motive, and that simple motive and that raison d'etre is independence, nothing less, and you do it by not worrying about all these stupid policies that divide us that the SNP have done. And that's what I'm getting back full circle on. When Nicola was handed the golden keys to free the people in the country of Scotland, she promptly sold them because she's captured by the British state, as has been proven. And you will see the evidence when the Alex Salmond case opens up and we see exactly who did what. We see who the Alphabeti women are, what they did. When we see who had the redacting paintbrush, John Swinney. When we see the small cabal that have sold us down the water and that are traitors to the people of Scotland, and you will have your comeuppance. And I don't mean that in a physically threatening way, because we don't believe in that. That's not necessary when dealing with such weak, parasitical, fawning sheep.
When Phil says,
I wish you'd say what you mean, Phil, instead of beating about the bush.
When Phil says we don't mean the many physical harms, Phil is speaking for Phil. That's all I'm saying. Here's the thing, but that's one of the things on it, Simon and Guy. I'll come to you as well. We've all been taught, oh, don't be nasty, don't be nice to everyone, and don't call them quislings or traitors. Be nice to them, because otherwise they'll never. These people don't care. And one of the classics. Last week we showed John Swinney belting out "God Save the English King" for all he was worth in Glasgow at the Commonwealth Games. This week, John. Now, if we remember in 2014, a certain man in Aberdeen, the man that delivers the papers and the milk to the oil rigs, who became an expert for the BBC on oil, although he didn't have as much information as our Phil, or as he delivered the milk and papers, literally. Okay, a few other things, but that's what he did. But John Swinney, on Sir Ian Wood's passing, gave him this, deeply saddened by the death of Sir Ian Wood, through business philanthropy and his deep commitment to Aberdeen, and shaped Scotland's economy and improved countless lives. This is a guy that sold out his nation of birth, Simon. And our independence warrior, so-called First Minister, leader of the independence movement, allegedly, is praising a man who betrayed his nation of birth. I'm angry about that. I don't associate with that.
I can tell. Again, you put stuff up on the screen that there's no. I can hardly see the screen, never mind what you put up. But I do remember reading it and chortling to myself. Again, there's a bigger picture, isn't there? I think the danger here is, I mean, there's a few cliches come to mind, like divide and rule. Now, that sounds cliched. It sounds, everybody knows what that means. That's commonplace. That's old-fashioned, whatever. But it's exactly what occurs on a daily basis to our movement, to our hope and prayer for independence. Because that's the strategy. There's no positive strategy. There's nobody ever sat me down and said, here's the positive case for the union. All they do is divide and rule. They infiltrate every platform that we've got, and they cause ruptions. And as Phil says, everybody's a genius and got their own idea of what independence will look like. All nonsense. And it's all cultivated by the institutions round about us to make us feel as though we're part of this democracy when we're patently not. And you've just exemplified that, Roddy. And we've talked about it throughout this programme, that Scotland would be an entirely different kind of nation. The politics between south of the border and north of the border are entirely different and always have been.
Yep.
And I think it's something we don't talk about enough, is the Labour movement and its birth. And it was a pro-independence movement in its early days. And the Labour movement is probably where we all sit round about, left of centre, in our politics. And Scotland does too. This was red. Scotland has always been red. My parents and grandparents and their parents would be turning in their graves the amount of Labour support that they've managed to lose here in Scotland. My point is that we're different. Scotland would have a totally different political landscape than what exists down south. And until we realise that we're totally different and they don't give a jot Not one jot.
No.
The Labour leaders used to rely on that Scottish vote, and at least we had some traction because the Labour Party depended on that solid, dependable Labour vote in Scotland. They can't depend on that any longer, and all it's done is made us even more ostracised and sidelined. So I'm not even sure what the question was anymore. But what I was thinking when Phil and Eva were talking was that the biggest resource that we're losing, and I can see it round about me with all the things, and Eva only touched the tip of the iceberg there and the things that are crumbling round about us, our Scottish institutions that are disappearing. The one thing that we're losing and we can't afford to lose is hope. And that's exemplified by that survey of the teenagers who don't see anything round the corner. We see that on the streets of Scotland and down south, where people are protesting and getting together and turning to drugs and all the rest of it, because we've taken away the most important thing that any society has. Government's job is to create an environment where people can prosper, where people can thrive, where people can get on in life, and as a community, bring the people less fortunate with them. That's what we're here for. That's what government's there for. Not this government, not a British government.
No, not one of them. But of course, as Simon alludes to there about, the Labour core, they could get a huge vote out of Scotland, and it's not happening now. They can't count on it. But as we'll hear soon from the Daily Record and the BBC and STV, when Monica or Michael Mara, one of the two of them is gets the coronation, becomes the new leader of Scottish Labour, which doesn't exist, folks. Yep. It's a lie, for a start. We'll get this usual shit. But it won't make one bit of difference. Here's the thing. While the union is on teetering, fighting among itself, Eva, the secret plan's been revealed, Eva. John's secret reply. The route to an Indy Ref 2, a Section 30, no less, Eva, is the hung parliament. We've got to count that all the numbers align, and there's a hung parliament, and they'll roll over for John in his Section 30. That's the plan. How do you feel about that one?
Is this a trick question? I'm laughing, but it's far from funny. I think it was Phil that said earlier that lots of people have lots of plans as to how we could achieve independence, and everybody thinks that they've got the right answer. We know what the answers are, and it's not a hung parliament, because that is again dependent on Westminster to do something or permit something. The people of Scotland have a long history as a sovereign nation in terms of attitude and belief and expectation. What we don't presently have is the ability to vote for our independence. We can refer to the Declaration of Arbroath or the Claim of Right, and we can argue about the impact of the Act and the Treaty of Union, and we can talk about court actions and Supreme Court decisions until they're coming out of our ears. The bottom line is that if we were led by political leaders who truly desire to achieve independence, those leaders would be chapping every door of every other potential leader or person who had something positive to deliver to a unified or unifying campaign. As it is, we've got Yes United doing a lot of sterling work. We've got various different independent supporting parties, our own one, Alliance to Liberate Scotland included, and we need to come together. We cannot achieve independence unless it's the people of Scotland who make it happen. Westminster never, ever will. There'll be a Section 30 permitted if Westminster control it and are confident that the vote would be a no to independence. If it looks like it would be yes, there will never be a referendum granted by Westminster. And the point of the exercise is, if we as a country want to be independent, we do it by ourselves. We don't ask permission. And the way it can be done is that, as Angus Brendan McNeill has said so often, including here, and I think he says it every day on social media, collapse Holyrood and have a Scottish parliamentary election, but again, manage that appropriately. As I touched on earlier, if we were doing it for Westminster, what you do is that you have your candidates lined up and not competing with each other and not splitting the vote, but you have people who are absolutely four square, totally determined and focused on independence, nothing less, not the other stuff that has really divided the movement so badly, as Phil also said earlier. But this attitude that just another few years, and then another push, and then we'll do this, and particularly Westminster cannot deny the Scots the right to decide. That was what we heard often in the run-up to this year's election. And those of us here and many others said Westminster can and Westminster will refuse. And that, again, as I said earlier, and Simon Peter, that people have to waken up. We have to stop believing, unfortunately, that the leaders of the SNP desire independence, because if they did, they would be doing things very differently than they have done for the last 12 years. So you have to put that to one side and consider that those who vote SNP or those who are members of the SNP, with the exception of the leadership, do want independence and they think the SNP is the best vehicle for it. Well, those are the people that need to put pressure on John Swinney and those around him to talk to the others within the movement. And in the absence of that, what has to happen is the others within the movement take control and have to end up steamrolling over the SNP to bring our country to the freedom that we don't just want or desire, our country desperately needs, so as we turn that future around.
Yeah, the clock's beating us. There's a few things I want to get in before we close. And one of the big stories this week, and it goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier, the Tartan Army and FIFA. One of the things I found, you said last week, Phil, and I agree with you, if the union was properly reformed and it was a union of equals and it was a democratic union and we had proper full fiscal autonomy in all the different countries and regions, whatever it was, if it was properly formulated, I would consider voting. I would consider voting for what is the best for Scotland. But the problem is that's never going to happen, because since 1979, when the neoliberals took over and we're reaping the hazard, I was going to say not the benefits, we're reaping the hell of that now with everything that's going on in the world. They created inadvertently China, the superpower, when they outsourced all our manufacturing to them. But they sold everything off. They commoditized everything. They took everything that was decent. The health service have been selling off bit by bit, the railways, the post office, everything. And they tried the same with football. The neoliberals in Infantino wanted Donald Trump's son-in-law's brother to head up and sell off the World Cup to the nearest bidder, which would have meant that every World Cup would have been played in England, in America. Whether it had been every 4 years or 2 years, it would have been sold off for commercial reasons, and the game would have gone. Now, fortunately, UEFA came out with a very strong statement against it, and we got the good news just before we started recording today on Saturday that, in fact, the plan has been withdrawn because of the backlash. Now, what I want to think, that's a long way to get to the question, Phil, but it shows the power of unity, because when the UEFA and the CONCACAF and the Asian FAs went, no, we're not up for this, when unity came, they forced the big beast into a defeat. And it's the same for us. But to stick with the UEFA thing, it was disgraceful what they were trying, but it was all about making profit again, everything to be profit, not what the people needed.
Exactly, and this is exactly why unification matters, and why it is it's not rocket science, folk. You that think you know better, and we all feel that we've been exposed to some information or we've heard a great idea. Very few ideas are original. The reality is we've seen the formula that works for Scottish independence. It was called the Yes Movement. It was unifying because it brought together every single Kirk, the full body of the Kirk. It brought everybody together, every stripe, everybody. I was working with the right wing, the left wing, the religious freaks, all sorts of different folk. I didn't care if you're voting for independence and you've got the betterment of our country, and I don't care what your vision is. You know, because I trust the Scottish people to make the right decision. It's a recurring theme we've had throughout this programme and in our lives, that we trust the Scottish people to make the right decisions if they're given that option. But this is about the UEFA originally raised that quote was brilliant. They threatened Thursday to boycott all men and women's World Cups in reaction to the North and Central, which is CONCACAF, and the Asian Football Confederation later came out with the same statement rejecting FIFA's proposal, but they all stopped short of a boycott. Now, this was senior advisor of Infantino, Carlos Cordeiro, resigned from his position in protest of the proposal, saying, "I cannot stand by while FIFA considers selling a stake in the World Cup. Let me be clear. I had no involvement," and I'm going to quote this guy, "I had no involvement in this proposal, and I oppose it unequivocally. It is a bad deal for FIFA members' associations, a bad deal for football, and a bad deal for the long-term future of the game." Kevin Lamour, who's FIFA's chief operating officer, also spoke again against Infantino, and I'm going to quote him, "It is the project of one person," Lamour said in a statement to the Associated Press. He added, "Not only must this project not go ahead, but the time has now come for football political leaders to ask themselves the right questions and make the right decisions." Do you see any parallels with the political system as we face it just now in the UK and in Scotland? It's exactly the same. That's what you're going on about, Roddy.
Yep.
Lamour also included this. "And if this means that I lose my job, then so be it. I will understand and respect that decision. At least I will sleep well tonight." How many politicians in Britain and in Scotland can say that?
Yeah, this was all about private equity owning the World Cup. And that guy you questioned, Carlos Cordeiro, just to put it in context, he was the vice chairman of Goldman Sachs, a hardcore capitalist. And he said, "This is a bridge too far, Simon." And when you've got someone who's an ex-vice chairman of Goldman Sachs, it tells you it was a bag of keith.
Nicely put, Roddy. Nicely put. It's good. We get this every 3 or 4 years. And although you said it was defeated, I don't really go along with that, because you don't defeat something like capitalism. You don't defeat the greed for money, and all they'll go away and do is lick their wounds and think about how they went about it and how they could have, instead of being sneaky and underhand with their backroom deals like they normally do. I would have expected them to go to Africa, for example, who didn't come out against it, because money is a different thing entirely in poor countries in Africa, who are still behind the idea because they were promised 40 million quid. Which would be life-changing, especially with the corruption that's there. It'd be life-changing for a few people. So to say we defeated it, I think that would be lackadaisical. What I liked about the announcement, whether that was today, it must have been yesterday. Because I've not seen the details today. I saw something yesterday that said, "We don't just want to defeat this; we want to put in safeguards for the future that make it can never happen again." And that's what we need to do with everything that we treasure and hold dear, is make it safeguarded to whatever degree we can from these people, because they ain't going away. The money men ain't going. Rangers were playing last night, the first game of the season, at 8 o'clock on a Friday night in Dundee. That's got nothing to do with football and everything to do with television money. Yeah. So the money in football is not new. That's not the issue. The question is whether the game exists for the fans or whether the fans exist for business, big business. And there is a trade-off there, because there's no doubt that FIFA have ploughed money into areas of the world and behind football that have changed countless lives. Even the Homeless World Cup that I was involved in with Mel Young changes lives. The power of football is enormous. The one example I was going to cite, and maybe one of you will remember it, the date of it, was when the English clubs were going to be part of a European league.
2 or 3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And who stopped it? The fans. The fans immediately went to the local clubs, to the Man Cities, the Man Uniteds, whoever, and said, "We ain't having this. You're not selling off our loyalty to be part of something just to make more money." So there's that side of it, that fan power, which is what's happened here. Make no doubt about it, because it's not a bottomless pit, and football is such an emotive sport. It's the most emotive sport in the world, obviously, that they didn't take countenance of that, because Trump doesn't understand that. Trump doesn't understand any of what we're talking about just now because he's so blinkered. And it was even nepotism that his own son-in-law or some relative was going to be running the whole thing.
Yep.
And the deal had all been done and dusted during the World Cup. That's what they were sitting talking about when we thought they were watching the football.
Yeah.
So the whole thing about the football, and the other part of it that gets missed out is the players. Because the road we're sliding down is that players will be playing twice a week, every week of the year, ultimately. There is a limit to what you can do with a product. And although it might seem limitless just now to the TV and promoters and whatnot, there is a limit to what you can expect and keep the product where it has to be. You guys remember when we only had highlights on a Saturday night for 30 minutes and then the same on a Sunday, and you couldn't record anything in those days. This is before your time, Eva, obviously. But the product was in such demand because it was so restricted. You can do the opposite because you can watch football 24/7. So these things have to be guarded. And the custodians of the game, because that's who UEFA and FIFA and the one thing about football is we're talking about a tiny percentage of footballers here and games. It's the World Cup every 4 years. I think there was 104 games over that 5-week period. What we need to remember, especially here in Scotland, because it's our national game, there are hundreds of thousands of children, parents, grandparents, every Saturday morning, every night of the week. Pollok United round the corner from me have over 900 children using the facilities every week. That's the core of football. That's where the excitement comes from, where the future supporters and players come from. And that's what the custodians of the game, FIFA and UEFA, can't lose sight of, the grassroots of the game.
Yeah, but they have. But that was the thing, Eva. They try, and there is a link here between our political struggle, and that's what I'm trying to get into this. But what he said, we need the money. We need to do this to raise the money to help the grassroots, just exactly what Simon's talking about. He said, we need to raise 4.2 billion. That's what we'll get if we do this, and you'll all get 30 million each. But what it transpired, the guy actually, Carlos Cordero, told us, the ex-Goldman Sachs, they've already got 15 billion in cash reserves, FIFA. They didn't need the 4.2. It was about them getting more of their hands, filthy hands, on that money. It was nothing about getting money to grassroots, typical of our society, of our politics in the Western world.
Absolutely. I've very little to add to what the rest of you have said. And I think that the sad thing about all of this is that our citizens are so cheesed off with politicians that we see voter apathy now in every single election. And that's where and to tie all of these things, or to try to tie these things together, Simon was talking about people needing hope, and it's about hope, and it's about trust, and it's about vision. And I think that there is an enormous opportunity for our movement in unification, where we are harnessing hope, and we're talking about the future, and we have all different visions for Scotland. But we know broadly what an independent Scotland would probably look like and how it would probably function. And we really need people to have politicians in whom they can put their trust and fire up the people to have enthusiasm and the passion that we had before in the lead up to 2014. And we still had it in the election campaign of 2015. And we were all punching the air at 2015's results because we thought, here we go. Well, this time, what if we did persuade John Swinney to run a proper independence campaign, get together all those who know what they're doing, and John Swinney create, in essence, an independence cabinet, an independence team that includes Alec Neil and Jim Sillars and Phil Boswell and Simon McLean and others from all over Scotland that contribute very much to our movement. Get these people together in a room and get the campaign up and running properly with folk that know what they're talking about, and then collapse the Scottish Parliament and have that Holyrood election with candidates that are properly chosen representative of the people, representative of the country, that all individually have something really valuable to contribute, whether it's skill, knowledge, experience, the ability to speak, the ability to act, the ability to lead, and the ability to go out and sell Scotland internationally. Create that cabinet now, because there's no reason not to, and there's every reason to do that, to then build the country that Scotland ought to be, that we can make it, we can do it, and we'll be the generation that's saying to future generations, we did it for you, we've given you the tools, we've given you the country, get on and get it built the way you want it to be.
Absolutely. Well, time is beating us, and there's just a couple of things I want to go through. Now, I saw a couple of headlines, and another one I want you to comment on in a second, Eva. But this was the Edinburgh TV Festival received 600,000 in funding from the Scottish Government, and then its organiser announced it would relocate itself, the Edinburgh TV, to Greater Manchester. Well, I tell you what I would do, Mr. Swinney. I would immediately withdraw their funding and tell them to go and take a fly to themselves, or get their arse back into Edinburgh. Simple as that. But what I want you to quote on is this, Eva. Words can't express it for me. The Scottish Government is funding a charity that teaches men how to chest feed their babies with false milk. What? Help me here, Eva.
It's very difficult to be polite about this, but what it is...
I know what it is. I'm disgusted.
That men who self-identify as women can be taught to, in inverted commas, chest feed in terms of the rules and regulations of this particular charity, because it enables people to self-identify into the opposite sex. I don't know what to say, because it's just made Scotland an international laughingstock yet again.
Yeah, tits been tits.
Very, very dangerous, because there's quite a few medical people have been prepared to go on record as saying that process can have no possible benefit for the child whatsoever, and the whole purpose is the benefit to the child. So if you remove the nutritional benefit for the child, then what is that exercise all about? I would suggest
gratification.
Yes, yeah. It will be sinister. It can't be anything other than that.
No, quite. That's the crazy world we live in. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you've enjoyed this.
Roddy, can I just say something about that topic that we were just skipping across there?
The breastfeeding.
It comes back down to the rudiments of what we've been speaking about, and we speak about every week. Whenever public money is involved, we don't need to get into the issues here. We don't need to get into whether men should be doing this or it's good for babies. Whenever government money, public money is involved, the government should be explaining clearly what the funding is for, what the outcomes are they're expected to achieve, and why they consider it a priority. Because the taxpayers have questions and deserve clear answers, rather than slogans or ideology about whatever their beliefs happen to be.
Yeah, 800,000 would bring a few houses back into the public sector that are lying derelict or needing repairs. It would fix a few and help a few of the homeless. Anyway, another story for another day. I hope this has been some help to you, ladies and gentlemen. And until we see you again, may you and yours please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.